Alrighty, guys. How we feeling? How we doing? Doing good. Doing good. Got some Rock Staff alum coming back here. Guys, Amanda. Wait, you think you can just sit right in the front and like go under the radar? Come on, get out of here. Guys, Amanda's back. Come on. Coming back from Spring Arbor. Go Cougars. Here we go. Good stuff. And Ari was here, and I don't see her anymore. So I don't know where she. Oh, there, like right in front of me. There you go. Ari's back too. That's pretty sweet. So glad. We have a doozy of a question today. I was gone last week, so Joey took us away, and Joey had a nice, easy, underhand toss kind of a question last week, which was how could a good God let evil happen in the world? You know, nice, easy question. And you know what? I heard Joey did a great job, so he did great. And we're going to do the exact same thing today. We're going to do a nice, easy question in our series where you guys have asked the questions and we're making a series out of the answers for your questions. This category that we've been on is questions about God. You ask questions about God. So the part that we're on is, what does God say about himself? How do we approach some of these questions that you guys have asked? And the one that you asked, and this was a middle school question and a high school question, which is pretty intense because I'm like, man, you really thought deeply with this. The question you asked was, how do predestination and free will work together? Dang, that's impressive. Like that is quite a doozy of a question. So first of all, thanks a lot for making me do that. But second of all, I'm actually super excited about it. So we're going to go into this together. You guys ready for a deep question about predestination and free will? You guys ready for it? Who's ready for it? All right, let's do it together. We're going to start with a really fun way to start every sermon, which is a definition of terms. All right, here we go. We're going to do a definition of terms. You ready for it? Woo! Definition. We're going to start with free will. We're going to start with free will. This is the beginning. Okay, free will. And this is my definition. I did as best as I could. All right, this is my definition for free will. The ability of a thinking being to choose their own destiny and future. That is free will, okay? The ability of a thinking being to choose their own destiny and future, all right? Now, this would be micro choices, like, you wake up in the morning and you're like, what do I want for breakfast? Do I want this cereal or do I want that cereal? Like, that's the kind of micro choice you might have made this morning. Or do I want no cereal because I woke up too late and now I got to run out the door without breakfast, like something like that. Or a macro decision, like a big decision. Like, man, one day you're going to be a senior in high school and you're going to say, what college do I want to go to? That's a pretty large decision in comparison to the breakfast one. No matter what the case, though, it's your ability to choose your own destiny and your own future. And we love to think of ourselves as having free will. Always having the ability to do what we want, right? We look around and our life is filled with choices. And they get more numerous as you guys get older. You guys start having the point where you can start to choose electives in your school, right? You can start to choose some of the classes that you're taking a little bit. Okay, that's going to increase. The older that you get, eventually you're going to get to the point where you get to choose a car. Right now, some of you guys are at a point where you get to choose what extracurriculars you're going to do, what sports you get to take part in, like things like that. We are surrounded by choice all over the place. We live in a world of free will, right? And this free will, guys, is a gift from God. It's a gift that he's given to us. We're going to look at this example. Right after Moses gives the law of the covenant to his people, he lists everything that he wants his people to follow and know. And he lists a bunch of blessings that are going to happen if they follow this. He says, if you follow my law, I will bless you with this and this and this, right? He blesses them. He says, this is going to happen if you follow my law. And then he gives a list of curses if they don't. If you don't follow my law, if you break it, it's going to be over here. You're going to be cursed in many ways, and here's how it's going to happen. And here's what he says after he gives the list of blessings and curses in Deuteronomy 30. He says, this day I call the heavens and the earth as a witness against you, that I've set before you life and death. Imagine that. God's like, I set before you life and death. Blessings and curses. Now choose life, so that you and your children may live, and that you may love the Lord your God, listen to his voice, and hold fast to him. Okay, God gives Israel a choice, and that choice is a gift. They have choice, so clearly we have choice. We have free will. This is a gift from God. All right, but this question isn't like what is free will and how does it work, right? That's not what the question is. It's how does free will and predestination go together? You guys have ever heard that word predestination? No? Well, let's describe it and define it together. And predestination is this. This is the act of God's sovereign planning to move all things in the universe according to his will and purpose. Therefore, all things have a destiny laid out by him to accomplish this plan. Predestination is a combination of two words: predestined. Destiny is a course that you have before you, and pre means it was already determined before you. You have a destiny that was determined by God before you were born. That's pretty crazy. Now, in the same way that the Bible talks about free will, that we have the freedom to choose, there's a lot in Scripture about God's sovereign will. The word sovereign means authority. So when we talk about God's sovereignty, we're talking about his power, his authority to move everything according to his will. Okay, that's what we're talking about. Proverbs 19:21 says, "Many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is God's purpose that prevails." And in Ephesians, we actually get the word predestination in our verse here, Ephesians 1:4-6. I want you to hear how crazy this is. This is you. Paul in Ephesians is talking about you right now. Here's what he says. For he chose us in him before the creation of the world to be holy and blameless in his sight. In love, he predestined us to sonship through Jesus Christ in accordance with his pleasure and will, to the praise of his glorious grace, which he's freely given us in the one he loves. Okay, so the first verse that we looked at under free will is God saying, choose life or death. Choose which one you want. You're like, okay, that makes sense. I get to have a choice of what I choose. And then Ephesians 1, he says, God chose you. So which one is it? Which one gets to do the choosing? Seems like you can't have both, right? Like it looks like I literally just gave you the opposite of free will. How can our ability to determine our own destiny and then God's plan of creating a destiny for us work together? They sound like they're mutually exclusive. But we've already laid the foundation for the truth of the Bible. We already know. We went through that a couple months ago. The Bible is reliable. The Bible is sure. So if there's something that the Bible's saying that doesn't seem to work together, and the problem is either the Bible is wrong or we're wrong, it's us every time, every single time. So how can God be sovereign and us have free will at the same time? Why doesn't this make sense to us? There's two main reasons, okay? The first one is that your mind is lacking. It's insufficient. I'm not calling you dumb. Although some of you guys are dumb, all right? But I'm just kidding. You're not dumb. You're not dumb. But your minds are insufficient. Shh. They're lacking. Okay, that's the first reason. The second reason is that we, all of us, are conditioned by our culture. Our culture around us, the world around us, the place, the community that you grew up in, has programmed your mind to think a certain way, to look at the world a certain way. We all have it. It's none of us exists outside of that. But let's start with the first one. Our mind is just not big enough to handle everything about God. He is so wonderful and so incredible that the closer you get to him, the more you have to just mentally let go of understanding every single part about him. And one of the coolest verses in the Bible is David figuring this out. When he approaches God and he thinks about everything that God knows and does, he starts to say, I can't handle this anymore. Here's what he says in Psalm 139. Lord, you have searched me. Lord, you know me. You know when I sit down, when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You're familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you, Lord, know it completely. You hem me in behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain. You know what else is too wonderful? Dylan and Jaden sitting next to each other. Why don't you guys split up? Jaden, can you go over there? All right, can you sit by Levi? There you go, buddy. All right. There you go. Amen. There you go. I love you guys. You're good. Hey, you guys too, all right? You guys are on the chopping block too, all right? Don't make me split you up too. All right, back to Psalm 139, all right? Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain. David's saying, and when I think about you, God, I can't deal. I can't figure it out anymore. It's too much. So this is the first reason that it's hard for us to conceive of God's sovereignty. It's the first reason it's hard for us to think of. But the second is that we have been conditioned according to the world around us, according to the culture around us. The culture surrounding you makes you think a certain way. And this is true no matter where you land on pretty much any issue, right? Ultimately, we are conditioned by a culture that's called Western culture, okay? That's us in the West. That's our culture, that's our place. And then in the East, there's a different kind of culture. Now, I'm painting some really broad brush strokes here, okay? I'm not saying everyone thinks the same way. But I'm saying that different cultures tend to give you different worldviews. Now, Eastern culture, this would be like Asia, Middle East, like Southeast Asia, all that area, okay? They're dominated by a culture called fatalism. Fatalism means that everything in your life comes down to fate, okay? Destiny. That means you have a fate, you have a destiny, it's already mapped out for you, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. All right? Everything is mapped out for you. If you want to try to fight your own destiny, you're just going to cement it more. Free will, under the concept of fatalism, is just an illusion. It doesn't really exist. So the Eastern culture has a hard time imagining that we have free will. And they have no trouble believing that we're predestined by God. That's not a hard thing for Eastern religion and Eastern mysticism and Eastern culture, right? But we're not dominated by that worldview. We're not dominated by like a fatalistic worldview. We are dominated by something called, I'm giving you some like really heady stuff here, classical liberalism. That is what we are grown up in. Now, that's not the kind of liberal that you might hear in the news when someone says liberal, like as in like politics or something. It has nothing to do with politics, all right? I'm talking about like classical liberalism with lowercase c, lowercase l. What this means, what classical liberalism is that each person has the ability to determine what they want to do in their life and how they want to do it. Every person is the master of their own destiny. That is classical liberalism. And no matter who you are, if you have been grown into that worldview, you're going to have a hard time with the concept that God could have given you a destiny, that God could have a plan for you that might trump other schemes and things in this world. So we've been conditioned to distrust the concept that God is sovereign, that he's in control, that your life is predestined, and our minds are not even big enough to fully understand it. So why would it be surprising that this question would bother us? Of course it would. But let's think about free will for a second. This is comfortable for us. We like the concept of free will. We like to think that we're in charge of our own destiny. Remember, we're grown up in classical liberalism, Western culture. So that's normal for us. But think about this. Even if you do believe this, you only believe it to an extent. You only believe it to a certain degree, right? Let me give you an example. Like pure classical liberalism would say, hey, if you're a hardworking person, you can do whatever you want with your life, right? You can make whatever you want as long as you go out and you get it, right? You grab the bull by the horns and you go do it. But if I'm the most hardworking man in the world and I'm born on the top of the mountain in Nepal and I'm a goat farmer, that's where I'm born in. My village is like 30 people and we are all goat farmers. But I am the hardest working man in the world. I am the greatest goat farmer that has ever lived and ever will live. I will not get as far in life as a hardworking man born in a wealthy suburb of Metro Detroit. That's just the way it is. Now, both of them did the most that they could with what they had. But who decided that one person would be born on the top of a mountain in Nepal and the other person would be born in Metro Detroit? Not you, not me, someone more. So even if you do believe in free will, there's obviously a limit to it to a degree. I had the choice 15 years ago to start working towards ministry, to start working towards being a pastor, and that's the direction I took. I did not have the choice to work towards a career in the NFL? Because I'm not good at football. I don't have that choice. It's not. Much of free will really is an illusion, even down to the smallest degree of decision making, even the tiny micro decisions that you feel like you have a lot of free will in, you actually don't if you really think about it. Like, think about this. Think about what you had for lunch today. Don't tell me, just imagine it, what you have for lunch today right now, okay? Now, you might have had a few options in your lunch today. If your mom packed your lunch, you had 0, all right? So automatically, you didn't have free will for lunch if your mom packed your lunch. But let's say that maybe in the cafeteria, you had a few options. If you go to public school or private school and they have options there, you might have picked between a couple options or whatever. There are 1 million different food options in the world. 1 million, billion, jillion, I don't know, there's a lot. But you didn't pick 1 out of 1 million different food options today. You picked out of 3. So your free will has been constrained, even to the smallest, tiniest degree. The most rebellious, free-spirited person in the world is still driven by forces they don't have control over. But that doesn't mean that Eastern fatalism is correct. Because remember, the Bible is clear that we do have a choice in our life. We have the choice to reject God or to believe in him. Galatians 5:13 says, you, my brothers and sisters, were called to be enslaved by something else, and you have no choice in your life. Is that what it says? No. It says, you're called to be free. Do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh, rather serve one another humbly in love. We are called to be free. We have free will. We have choice. So how do those two things work together? But here's the best way to think about it. Here's the best way to look at it, okay? Every morning, when you wake up, you are living in a world where you have choice in. You are living with free will. Every morning, every time you wake up, you have free will. And you got to remember that this is a gift. Every single day, you wake up and you have this. You have choices in your life to make. And this is a gift from God that you have that. However, at the same time, remember that your freedom exists underneath this protecting umbrella of God's sovereignty, of his control, of his authority. You are free. But that doesn't mean that God is not in control. You exist under the umbrella of his control. He has a purpose and a will for you. So live in it. And don't be afraid when things happen around you, because God is in control. And it's a part of his plan, whatever that thing is. I said it a few weeks ago, but I don't remember how many people were there for it. But about 1 month ago, my brother accepted Christ for the first time in his life. And it's been, I asked him if it was okay if I talked about him, just for the record. But he accepted Christ, and it's like the highlight of my year, easily. It's been an answer to prayer, and I'm so happy about it. Right after he did, I went out to eat with him after 7:07, so it was late, but we just talked because I just wanted to hear his story. I wanted to hear what was going on. And he accepted Christ by himself in his house. That's where he did it. He was in his living room, and he fully believed. He got down on his knees, and he just prayed the prayer of faith. So cool. But he asked me this really funny question. He said, Perry, what would have happened if on my way home from work, the day that I accepted Christ for the first time, what would have happened if on my way home, I got hit by a bus and died? Am I going to heaven or hell? Because I was going to accept him. I was on my way to go accept Jesus. Would that have been close enough for God? Would he have been well, you were almost there, so I'll give you a pass. Or would he have been well, sorry, you were that close, but the bus came, so sorry, trap door. And then you fall down and you enter you drop into a cauldron or something. What would have happened, right? What would have happened if I got hit by a bus on my way home to accepting Jesus? Am I saved or not saved? You know where that question comes from? That question comes from a Western mind that doesn't understand the umbrella over our free will. Because at the same time that David, sorry, that's my brother's name, at the same time that David chose to accept Christ, there was no bus that was going to get in the way of that. It's a bit of a silly question. Now, I'm not saying it's a dumb question. I didn't like laugh at him or anything. But that question comes from saying God's not in control. Like God was hoping that David would accept Jesus for the first time, and then bam, there's a bus. He's like, oh no, darn it. What am I gonna do? Darn, well, there it is. Like David died. Like that's too bad. I guess you can't go into heaven now. Like God is sovereign. He's in control. Therefore, there's no bus that was ever going to stop that. David was always going to end up there on his knees accepting Jesus. That was the plan. He followed that plan with his choice. We can't always understand completely how these two things go together. But we know they do because the Bible's clear that they do. So here's what we do. We live faithfully in both of them. And here's how. First thing is that you take responsibility and take comfort. I know responsibility is that word that your dad tells you when like you're being bad or something. So just like try to erase that from your mind right now. You take responsibility over your life. We also take comfort. Your free will, the existence of your free will means you take responsibility for your life, for how you spend your time, for your actions. Every action that you take has consequences. You wake up every single morning, you have a whole list of decisions to make that day, and they will affect your life, and they will affect the people around you. So take responsibility for them. And that means that the choices you make for the Lord are going to result in huge blessings for you and others. The choices that you make in sin are going to be the opposite for you and others. And then you repent and seek forgiveness for sins because nobody forced you to do them. It wasn't your fate to do them. But at the same time, live in comfort and joy that you're in the hands of a God who has a plan for everything, including you. There's nothing that can happen to you that isn't a part of God's plan. So take comfort in that. In the same way that you take responsibility during the daytime when you're up and doing things, you go to bed every night and sleep soundly because there's a God who's in control and you're under the umbrella of his sovereignty. Take comfort in that. All right, let's head to our life groups.